Here's a creepy topic with members from different groups. Amoeboid protozoans have pseudopods for movement. The word means false feet. They cause a serious disease called amoebic dysentery. The species is Entamoeba. It is typically in tropical countries where human sewage is not managed properly. The cyst goes into the stomach unharmed. Next, it divides into a trophozoite, migrates in the intestines, liver, and lungs. Eggs are laid, and they pass out of the human's body and then infects another host. Symptoms: diarrhea, blood, and mucus, and lots of it. I had this disease in Africa. I sat on a bucket for a couple days. The diarrhea was so severe. Got tired of that, made some diapers out of T-shirts, and found my way to a doctor. There is complete recovery for this disease. Sporozoans, we think of malaria with the sporozoite stage. It's very resistant. It moves into the human bloodstream when a mosquito takes a blood meal. The sporozoite flows and is eventually filtered up by the liver. Now the liver is doing its job, but it gets burned in this case because the merozoite stage then divides and gradually destroys the liver. Some of them will break out of red blood cells, and this is when toxins are released and the victim feels fever, sometimes 108, 110. Their teeth are chattering, they're shivering. I've seen it. And then back and forth, high fever, chills. The gamete stage is when the cycle is completed because another mosquito takes a blood meal, takes in the gamete stage, and infects a new host. Flagellates. These are a group of organisms with a flagella, and many of them have two stages. A trophozoite stage, which is when they're moving and feeding, and then the resistant cyst stage. Example, Giardia. The cysts are released in feces. Humans, beavers, lots of other animals will release the feces, and then it travels to new organisms. The trophozoite gradually destroys the intestines, and sometimes the symptoms are severe, and sometimes there's no symptoms. It depends on the. Trichomonas, another flagellate, lacks a cyst stage, and so it's fragile. And the way it manages its condition here is it gets a direct ride to a new host through sexual intercourse. Sometimes people say, well, I got it from the toilet seat, but that's pretty unlikely. In women, it can cause sterility. Trypanosome, these are long flat protists, and often the flagella is attached to the body. Trypanosome brucei causes African sleeping sickness. It's not a serious disease. You just have fatigue and lowered immunity. It is transmitted by a very famous fly, the tsetse fly. The bite is painful. Trypanosome cruzi, that causes Chagas disease. It is widespread in the American tropics. Take a look at this map. Several million people each year in the Americas are infected with Chagas. So this is a serious disease. Intermediate host is a reduvid bug. It bites an infected animal. Could be human, but also dogs, cats, raccoons. The trypanosome goes into the body of the bug. It multiplies, and that bug becomes a huge incubator and starts defecating lots of trypanosomes. So, when the bug crawls up onto a human host at night, it likes to bite the thin tissue near the mouth or the eyes. Its nickname is kissing bug. It deposits its feces that's loaded with trypanosome, and then the host, the human, scratches because that's a normal thing when you're sleeping and all of a sudden you get bit. And unfortunately that smears the feces into the wound. The cycle continues when the bug bites an infected human host, and we have symptoms such as heart and brain damage and death. Very serious and very widespread and increasing in many areas. Platyhelminthes, platy means flat, helminth means worm. The flukes are one type of flatworm. They have suckers for attaching to their hosts inside. The blood fluke, called Schistosoma mansoni, causes a very famous disease called schistosomiasis. It's in many countries of the world. It damages the liver and kidney, often doesn't kill the victim. Its favorite habitat is warm water that is contaminated with human sewage. Life cycle. The young fluke larvae develop in snails. So the snail is what's called an intermediate host. The flukes then emerge as swimming cercaria. They bore a hole out of the snail, and they swim for a while as cercaria until they can find their definitive host, such as a human. When I lived in Africa, we would check the water, and if there were snails, we'd scoop those up and look for holes. And if there were holes in the snail shells, well, we wouldn't take a bath that day. Oh well. Nematodes are the roundworms. There are many types of roundworms. I'm going to talk about the pinworms. Enterobius is the technical name, causes enterobiasis. When a person sleeps, the female pinworm that lives in the intestines will travel up the rectum to deposit her eggs on the perianus. Peri means around, anus, I think you know what that means. This is a very tender tissue, so the victim is going to itch and scratch. The eggs collect under the fingernails, and soon the whole family is infected. Very, very common. Oh, if you wonder about that anus picture, one way to, if you have a child that is having trouble sleeping, sometimes cries out at night, put a piece of sticky tape across the perianal region. In the morning, then glove up, pull that tape off, and of course explain it to your child what you're doing, and see if there's any female pinworms. You can use a flashlight examination in the middle of the night too, but I think sticky tapes. Moving on, pork roundworm. Here's an evil worm for sure. Trichinella is the genus. It causes trichinosis. What happens is, when a pig consumes fecal matter, the trichinella worm forms these very resistant cysts in pig muscle. Then, if we are foolish enough to eat undercooked pork, then the trichinella moves into our body and uses the bloodstream for transport. Unfortunately, it doesn't just stay in the bloodstream. It will move throughout the body, puncturing different internal organs, even moving into the brain. So internal bleeding and many times death. Pork in this country is safe. The swine industry is very cautious. However, meat coming across the border, pork, I don't think I'd. Acarines, often known as ticks and mites. Some ticks carry a spirochete bacteria, and they will inject it when they're taking a blood meal. Example is Lyme disease. In Lyme disease, the initial symptoms are a rash, sometimes a bullseye-shaped rash at the site of the bite. But if untreated, then joint inflammation and muscle paralysis can follow. And it's sad because doxycycline takes care of it real easily in the early stages. Flavivirus, this is a virus, but it is joined with a mosquito. The mosquito takes a blood meal, and the virus enters the body. It's called dengue fever or sometimes backbreak fever, and I'll tell you why. A high fever, sharp pains in the joints and muscles. I forgot to explain the map. It is very widespread. I don't talk about many trivial things in this class. The flavivirus is clever. It is studded with E proteins, and these attach to our own monocytes. So here we are. We're infected with flavivirus. Our monocytes go in to attack, and they get bound to these E proteins, and then they can't fight. So eventually, the monocytes are knocked out of action. The virus starts to use them for a lytic pathway, and our body defenses are overwhelmed. Wow. There's a lot out there. Be safe. Good luck. Summary. These are kind of a group of non-viral bacterial organisms. Amoeboid protozoans. The hallmark is the pseudopod. Entamoeba is the organism. Dysentery is the disease. We find